D.B. Cooper, 1971, USA. A man calling himself D.B. Cooper boarded a Northwest Orient Airlines flight on November 24, 1971, flying from Portland to Seattle. He looked completely normal. Business suit, calm behavior, no panic. But shortly after takeoff, everything changed. He handed a note to a flight attendant. At first, she ignored it, thinking it was just a phone number. But then he leaned in and said quietly, "You better look at that note. I have a bomb." He opened his briefcase. Inside were wires, red sticks, something that looked exactly like explosives. Now he had full control. His demands were precise: $200,000 in cash and 4 parachutes. Why 4? Because he wanted authorities to think he might force someone to jump with him. That prevented them from giving him a faulty parachute. When the plane landed in Seattle, his demands were met. Passengers were released. Money was delivered. But Cooper wasn't done. He ordered the plane back into the air, this time flying low, slow, with the rear staircase unlocked. Then, in the middle of a dark, stormy night, somewhere over dense forest, he took the money, strapped it to himself, and jumped out of the plane. No tracking, no clear landing point, no body ever found, just a man disappearing into the sky and becoming one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in history. John Dillinger, 1934, USA. In 1934, one of America's most wanted criminals, John Dillinger was locked inside the Crown Point Jail in Indiana, a place authorities proudly called escape-proof. Thick walls, armed guards, steel bars. They believed there was no way out, but Dillinger didn't rely on force. He relied on deception. Inside his cell, he carved a gun out of wood, carefully shaping it, then painting it black using shoe polish until it looked real. Not perfect, but convincing enough. Then came the moment. He hid the fake gun and waited for the right opportunity. When a guard came close, Dillinger pulled it out, pointed it directly at him, and acted with total confidence. That was the key. He didn't hesitate. He didn't show doubt. To the guards, it looked real. And in that split second, fear took over logic. They obeyed. Dillinger forced them to open the cells, then locked the guards inside instead. Just like that, the most secure jail became useless. But he didn't stop there. He walked out, got into the sheriff's car, and drove away. That one move made things even worse, because crossing state lines in a stolen police car turned his escape into a federal crime, bringing in the FBI. But by then, it was too late. Dillinger had already proven something powerful. Sometimes, you don't need real weapons. Just the ability to make people believe you do. Alcatraz escape, 1962, USA. In 1962, 3 inmates from the most secure prison in America, Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, did something no one was supposed to do. They escaped. The men were Frank Morris and brothers John Anglin and Clarence Anglin. Alcatraz was considered escape-proof, surrounded by freezing water, strong currents, and constant surveillance. But these men didn't attack the system directly. They studied it. For months, they secretly worked inside their cells. Behind each cell, there was a small ventilation opening. Using makeshift tools like spoons and stolen materials, they slowly widened those holes, night after night. To hide the damage, they covered it with fake walls made of cardboard and paint. But the most genius part? They created fake heads, using soap, paper, and real human hair collected from the prison barber. They built realistic dummy heads and placed them on their pillows. So, during night checks, guards thought they were sleeping. Meanwhile, behind the walls, they climbed into a hidden utility corridor. From there, they reached the roof. Then came the final step. They built a raft made of raincoats, sealed together to float. On the night of June 11th, 1962, they slipped out, climbed down, and entered the freezing waters of San Francisco Bay. After that, nothing. No confirmed bodies, no proof of survival. The FBI officially said they likely drowned, but many believe they made it because no clear evidence was ever found. And that's what makes this escape legendary. Not just how they broke out, but the fact that, to this day, no one knows if they actually got away. Richard Lee McNair, 2006, USA. In 2006, Richard Lee McNair pulled off one of the most calculated prison escapes in modern history. He wasn't relying on force. He was relying on engineering and patience. Inside the prison, McNair worked in a maintenance area. That gave him access to materials, tools, and time to plan. He secretly built a small, custom-made escape pod. Basically a box, just big enough to fit his body. Inside, he added a breathing tube so he could survive for hours. Then he waited for the perfect moment. The prison regularly sent out mail bags and equipment boxes to the outside. And on that day, McNair placed himself inside the pod and sealed it. He was loaded along with other cargo and transported out of the prison without anyone noticing. No alarms, no resistance, just gone. What happened next is even crazier. Shortly after escaping, a police officer actually spotted him and stopped him for questioning. Now this is where most people panic, but McNair didn't. He stayed calm, spoke normally, gave a fake name, and acted like an innocent jogger. His confidence was so convincing, the officer let him go. He literally talked his way out, face to face with law enforcement, and just like that, he disappeared into the night. What makes this escape powerful isn't just the plan, it's the mindset. He didn't rush, he didn't show fear. He controlled the situation, even when everything could have collapsed. That's not just escaping a prison, that's outsmarting the system at every level. Napoleon Bonaparte, 1815, Elba Island. In 1814, after years of war across Europe, Napoleon Bonaparte was finally defeated. Instead of executing him, his enemies made a different decision. They exiled him to a small island called Elba. On paper, it looked like the end. But here's what they underestimated. Napoleon wasn't imprisoned like a normal criminal. He was still allowed a small army, personal guards, and freedom to move around the island. And more importantly, he still had influence. For months, he quietly observed the political situation in France. The new king, Louis XVIII, was losing support. People were unhappy. Napoleon saw an opportunity. So, in February 1815, he made his move. He escaped Elba by ship with around 1,000 loyal soldiers and sailed back to France. Now, here's where it gets insane. As he marched toward Paris, troops were sent to stop him. This should have been the end, but instead of fighting, Napoleon walked forward alone and spoke to them. He said, "If any of you will shoot your emperor, here I am." No one fired. Instead, the soldiers joined him. One by one, his army grew. By the time he reached Paris, he had taken back power without a single major battle. This comeback became known as the 100 Days. It wasn't just an escape, it was a psychological takeover. He didn't break out of prison. He walked out of exile and convinced an entire country to take him back. El Chapo, Joaquin Guzman, 2015, Mexico. In 2015, one of the most powerful drug lords in the world, Joaquin Guzman, was locked inside Altiplano, a maximum security prison in Mexico. This wasn't an ordinary prison. Constant surveillance, cameras everywhere, guards watching every move. Escape seemed impossible, but outside the prison, a plan was already in motion. A tunnel, over 1.5 kilometers long, was being built directly toward his cell. And this wasn't just a hole in the ground. It had ventilation systems for air, electric lighting, reinforced walls, and even a rail system. Inside his cell, there was one blind spot, the shower area. Cameras couldn't fully see. That's where everything happened. On July 11th, 2015, El Chapo walked into the shower and disappeared. Underneath, there was a hidden opening. He climbed down a ladder into the tunnel. Waiting for him was a modified motorcycle attached to rails, designed to move quickly through the narrow passage. He rode through the tunnel, all the way to a construction site outside the prison. From there, he escaped using vehicles prepared in advance. By the time authorities realized what happened, he was already gone. No alarms in time, no interception, just a perfectly executed plan. This wasn't luck. This was months of engineering, coordination, and precision. While the system focused on controlling the inside, the real escape was built from the outside, and in one moment, he slipped through the only blind spot and vanished. Zheng Kaigui, suspected fugitive, China. The case of Zheng Kaigui is less about a confirmed prison escape, and more about one of the most mysterious disappearances linked to law enforcement in China. Zheng Kaigui was reportedly a serious criminal suspect involved in violent crimes, and by the time authorities closed in on him, he was already extremely difficult to track. What makes his case interesting is not a dramatic prison break, but how he managed to evade capture completely after becoming a high-priority target. According to reports, when authorities launched operations to arrest him in the 1990s, he used a combination of tactics that made him nearly invisible. He avoided staying in one place for long, constantly moving between remote rural areas and low-profile locations where police presence was weak. He also allegedly changed his appearance repeatedly. Simple disguises like changing clothing style, growing or shaving facial hair, and blending into working-class environments where no one would question him. Another key factor was the lack of digital tracking at the time. No modern surveillance systems, no centralized databases like today. That meant once he left a region, he effectively reset his visibility. Over time, leads began to dry up. What makes the case stand out is that despite multiple investigations and search efforts, there was no confirmed arrest, no verified death record, and no definitive closure. So Zheng Kaigui became part of a category of fugitives who didn't escape in a cinematic way, but instead simply disappeared into the gaps of the system. And in law enforcement terms, that is often the hardest kind of outcome to deal with. Yoshi Shiratori, 1936 to 1947, Japan. Between 1936 and 1947, a man named Yoshi Shiratori became one of the most unbelievable escape artists in history. He didn't escape once. He escaped 4 different prisons, and he didn't use weapons or outside help. He used patience, observation, and intelligence. His first escape was simple, but smart. He studied the guards, waited for the right moment, and used a small piece of wire to unlock his handcuffs. Then, he slipped away quietly. But each time he was caught again, security became tighter, and each time, he adapted. In one prison, he noticed something most people would ignore. The metal bars on his cell were slowly weakening in the extreme cold. So every day, he threw miso soup on the bars. Why? Because the salt would slowly corrode the metal. This wasn't fast. It took time, days, weeks, but eventually, the bars weakened enough for him to bend them and escape. In another prison, he carefully studied the building structure and found a weak spot in the wall. Using basic tools and pure persistence, he dug his way out. What makes his story powerful isn't just the escapes, it's the method. He didn't rush, he didn't panic. He observed, waited, and used the environment itself as his tool. While others tried to break the system with force, Shiratori quietly studied it and then slipped through its weakest points again and again.